everyone, and welcome to the Debrief on ABC News Live. I'm Kimberly Brooks. Thanks so much for joining us. We're bringing you the latest on the massive protest against the governor in Puerto Rico. Plus, the UK has a new prime minister, and we're talking about the testimony tomorrow that everyone wants to watch from special counsel Robert Mueller. But first, here are your headlines.
The U.S. is denying Iran's claim that 17 Iranians have been arrested accused of spying for the CIA. Some of the suspects have been reportedly sentenced to death. Iranian state television says these images, which we've blurred, showed CIA officers who ran a network of spies allegedly targeting Iran's nuclear and military sites. President Trump dismissed the claim as totally false.
I read a report today about CIA. That's totally a false story. That's another lie. They put out propaganda. They put out lies.
The lights are out across much of Venezuela. In Caracas, the massive power outage snarled traffic, shutting down the subway system, forcing workers to walk home during rush hour. It's the first blackout to hit the capital since March. The government blames this power outage on a so-called electromagnetic attack. Authorities are working to restore service.
The murders of an American woman and her boyfriend in Canada are raising fears about a serial killer on the loose. New surveillance video shows China Dees and Lucas Fowler embracing at a gas station about a day before they were murdered. Police in British Columbia say they were shot to death, and their murders could be connected to a third mysterious death.
It's unusual to have two major investigations undergoing of this nature in northern BC at the same time, and so we recognize that there is a possibility that these could be linked.
Police have issued a sketch of a bearded man. A witness says she saw that man talking with the couple before they were found dead. On the field, a rare play in Minnesota. The Yankees' Edwin Encarnacion hits a ground ball. The third baseman fills it, steps on third, and throws a runner out at second base. Then the batter is thrown out at first. That's a triple play. It was the 13th in the team's history. Minnesota also went on to win that game.
We began in Puerto Rico, where over 500,000 protesters were met with tear gas in the capital late last night. And this comes as they continue to call for the governor to resign immediately over leaked conversations showing him using violent, sexist, and homophobic language. So Victor Oquendo is in San Juan with the latest. Victor?
Kimberly, the cleanup is underway here in Old San Juan. This police barricade right behind me, right in front of the governor's mansion, the front line of those late-night clashes with protesters. Police deploying tear gas to disperse crowds after protesters gathered late into the night following a day of massive demonstrations. The anger aimed at the island's governor reaching a boiling point as hundreds of thousands demand he step down. Governor Ricardo Rosselló marred by controversy ever since a profane group chat between he and his aides was leaked, appearing on Fox News, digging in on his refusal to give up power. On the mainland, the Ricky resign chant echoing in New York's Grand Central Station, that anger and frustration even reaching the White House, President Trump calling the governor terrible, slamming Rosselló for his handling of hurricane disaster funding. In that interview with Fox News, the governor struggled to name one supporter here on the island. He eventually named a local mayor. We reached out to that mayor who told us, no, he does not support the governor. Kimberly?
All right. Thank you, Victor. And we want to continue this conversation with Julio Ricardo Varela. He's the co-host of the political podcast In the Thick and the founder of LatinoRebels.com and has been covering Puerto Rico for years. Good to see you, Julio. So you see there's nearly 1 million people in the streets over these chats. But I read your article that you wrote yesterday, and you said that this is really a culmination of the worst political crisis in modern Puerto Rico's history. What do you mean by that?
I mean, the last 14 days, it'll be 2 weeks since the first leak of the Telegram Gate chats came out. And it has been a constitutional crisis. I mean, the governor of Puerto Rico was at the World Cup, the Women's World Cup final in Paris. Think about that. And had to come back by Wednesday because of the Telegram chat, as well as the federal arrest of his former administration, his two former administration officials, canceled his vacation. You see, he's the loneliest man in Puerto Rico. Some say he could be the loneliest man in the world right now. There's no one that is supporting Ricardo Rosselló. I've been talking to people inside the government as well who have telling me privately that he has no support. There's a possibility of even more resignations. There were some resignations that happened yesterday in his administration, and I'm being told that more are coming on the way. And then the Fox News interview. I mean, what was that? What was that? That was Ricardo Rosselló talking about procurement reform when there was anywhere from 500,000 to 1 million people on the busiest expressway in Puerto Rico, peacefully protesting, asking him to resign. I mean, this all culminated last night in the Capitol in Fortaleza. It was clear that the police threw a tear gas into the car. They actually confirmed it on Puerto Rican radio this morning. And this is going to continue and continue and continue until Ricardo Rosselló leaves.
Yeah, so those images are crazy. I want to ask the obvious question: why does the governor feel that he doesn't need to resign? I mean, half of the island is in the streets.
Well, I mean, there's a couple of things here that you need to understand. First of all, there's no Secretary of State. He's resigned as well. He was part of the group chat. And basically, in terms of the succession of, according to the Constitution, he's sort of the second in command. Right now, if you looked at if Ricardo Rosselló resigned today, it would be the head of the Department of Justice, who actually is now, as of this morning, has called for the participants of the group chat to turn over their cell phones. So it's such a mess. The pro-statehood party, the leader right now, who, Ricardo Rosselló resigned as the leader of the pro-statehood party on Sunday, and now the president of the Senate, Thomas Rivera Schatz, is the president of the pro-statehood party. They don't know what they're going to be doing. There's actually calls for impeachment that are going to come out of the House. What does that mean? We're really going to go through an impeachment process in Puerto Rico, and the governor of Puerto Rico is saying, bring it on? This is Puerto Rico has no credibility in D.C. right now. I know that for a fact. It has no credibility locally with its own people. And it's becoming, and we're seeing images of tear gas every night after 11 o'clock, where the Puerto Rico police that has a history of repression against protesters. After 11 o'clock, there's no constitution in Puerto Rico. There's no freedom of expression. I mean, we're going into the third week now. This is not going to stop.
All right. Well, we're definitely going to keep our eyes on what's happening there over the next couple of days and until something happens. So, Julio Ricardo Varela, thanks for joining us today. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yes. And guys, we move overseas to London, where there is a new prime minister. Boris Johnson, a Brexit hardliner, is winning. He won the Conservative Party's election, and he will formally take over the role from Theresa May tomorrow. So I want to go to Ian Pannell in Westminster with more. Ian, what does this mean for Brexit now that is his responsibility?
Yeah, hi, Kimberly, on a very hot afternoon in London, not just the weather, but also politically. This is something of an earthquake. Brexit, just to remind viewers, is the decision by Britain to withdraw from the European Union. The European Union is a customs political union, but essentially we do most of our trade with Europe. The difficulty has been, although Britain in a referendum voted to leave to leave Europe in this Brexit vote, it hasn't been able to agree the terms and conditions. Every time it's put to a vote in that building behind me, it's been rejected 3 times. So, for Boris Johnson, there is an October the 31st deadline. Everyone's saying it's going to be a terrible Halloween this year. That is the date by which Britain is supposed to leave the European Union. It's been put back. Boris Johnson says he won't delay anymore. So if they don't get an agreement by October the 31st, they'll go for hard Brexit. And what that means is leaving without any trade agreements, any deals, any arrangement between Britain and Europe. Just to give you a small example of what that means, there's a plane that takes off from London to Athens about 10 p.m. in the evening, lands at 1 the following morning. When Brexit comes into effect, when we withdraw from the European Union, it'll leave European airspace in Britain. By the time it lands, it won't have permission to land. The people on that plane, their passports won't be valid without visas. So there are a whole bunch of things that fall into place if you have hard Brexit, but that's where we are now.
And Ian, what's the mood in London and across the UK? What are you hearing from detractors and supporters of Boris Johnson?
Yeah, look, that's a good question, because the mood in London isn't necessarily reflective of the mood across the UK. London has voted overwhelmingly to remain, to stay part of London. I don't know whether you can see them behind me, but all those blue flags with the gold stars around them, those are all people who are against leaving the European Union. Londoners have been reacting with horror at the idea of Boris Johnson, saying this won't resolve the divisions in the country, whereas wider, again, there are splits within his own party. I mean, people who were in the cabinet this morning are now going to resign because Boris Johnson's there. He's a hugely divisive, controversial figure. He's a populist. Many people compare him to President Trump. So we will have to see what the reaction is. The first question, though, is can you deliver Brexit? And after that, can you win an election?
All right. And Ian, before we go, I'm telling you now, I'm about to put you on the spot. So Boris Johnson is the 14th prime minister under Queen Elizabeth's reign, right? With Winston Churchill being the first. So you're presumably an expert in British history. Can you name the other 12? Ian.
In a word, Kimberly, there isn't a simple word, actually. Well, the simple word is no. I haven't been a foreign correspondent working overseas for 15 years. No, I can't. But what I can tell you is that something like 80 to 90% of them have been public school. They went to either Eton or Harrow, and they all went to Oxford or Cambridge. Class divisions in Britain still go on today, as do wider divisions, just like you see in America. But, Kimberly, I'm going to get you back for that.
All right, Ian, thanks for joining us today. Good to see you.
Thank you.
Yes. And guys, tomorrow is the day congressional Democrats and many Americans have been waiting for. Special counsel Robert Mueller will publicly testify on Capitol Hill. The first time many people will hear from him in detail about his 22 months of work culminating in the Mueller report. So Pierre Thomas is in our D.C. bureau with more on what we can expect. Pierre?
Kimberly, the clock is ticking and the pressure is mounting now that we're about 24 hours from Mueller's testimony. He's been intensely preparing with a small team of former staffers from the special counsel's office in space provided by his former law firm here in Washington. I've been talking to key sources who have worked closely with Mueller in the past, and they tell me that his preparation for congressional testimony typically involves hours of mock hearings and rehearsals. He'll be giving an opening statement prior to taking questions from Congress, but he's being warned by the Justice Department that his testimony, quote, must remain within the boundaries of his released report. So the stage is set with Democrats trying to pull out the most damaging information in the report and Republicans pointing to specifics that are favorable to the president. Kimberly?
All right, Pierre. And guys, if you want to watch the Mueller hearing tomorrow, we have you covered. You can watch the entire thing right here on ABC News Live. And we're going to stay in Washington. President Trump announcing a deal on the budget. Congressional leaders reaching a 2-year budget agreement that also raises the debt ceiling. So I want to bring in Karen Travers at the White House. Karen, good to see you. Can you just break this down for us? What's this deal about?
Yeah, so two big headlines there. One, this does raise the debt ceiling for the next 2 years and also sets budget caps, spending limits for that same time period. So two big things that were on the must-accomplish list for this Congress and President Trump, and things they wanted to get out of the way, Kimberly, before the election year. A couple big numbers here. This budget framework is $1.37 trillion for what they'd be looking at for spending bills that they'll agree on over the next few months and have to get done by this fall. The other big thing is that this agreement does raise spending, $320 billion over previously negotiated spending limits. That, of course, is sparking some grumblings from conservative Republicans who say that this is spending run amok and that this should not be agreed to. But the president yesterday announcing this agreement between his administration, the Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin negotiated for the Trump White House, and congressional leaders from both parties. So there might be a bit of a revolt from some conservatives, but this could pass in the House with just a Democratic vote. Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell saying they'll get this across the finish line, too.
Yeah, so we just saw you say there billions added to the government spending. We all remember the Republicans blasting the Obama administration for spending so much in the debt. Is it different because there's a Republican in the office now?
And it's because it's Donald Trump in office right now. And we've certainly seen Republicans very hesitant to go against something that the president has indicated he's in favor of. If the administration has negotiated this, sure, they can raise complaints, but the reality is the Democrats are also controlling the House, and it can get through without their support. I think it's notable, though, and maybe we're parsing this a bit, but the president in that tweet you see there says, I'm pleased to announce a deal has been struck with the congressional leadership, but there's no explicit recent statement from the president saying, I support this deal, I will sign this deal, get this to me and we'll get it moving. So there's maybe some quibbling with the fact that over the next couple of days, 72 hours, maybe the president could get wishy-washy depending on who comes out strongly against this and who gets to the president. But for now, administration officials are saying they feel good that this is going to get across the finish line. They're looking for the House to pass it this week, the Senate likely to pick it up next week and wrap everything up before the August recess.
All right, Karen Travers at the White House, thanks for the updates. We appreciate it. And remember Cesar Sayoc? He's the man who sent pipe bombs via mail to media outlets and top Democrats, including President Obama and President Clinton. Well, we're getting some chilling new details about his motive. So our Jack Date is in Washington with more. Jack, good to see you today. What have we learned about his case? What's the new details?
Well, so new defense filings in the case put forward by his defense lawyers paint a really grim portrait of Cesar Sayoc. He's somebody who they say lost everything in the Great Recession. He lived out of his van for 10 years. That van, you'll remember, was festooned with stickers supporting President Trump and critical of some of the critics of President Trump. And in those circumstances, his lawyers say in this darkness that Sayoc found light in Donald J. Trump, and he developed a real obsession with President Trump, and he followed social media's postings and conservative media conspiracy theories, and those really sort of drove him. At this time, he was also heavily using steroids and suffering from mental illness, and he really descended into sort of a paranoia that sort of drove some of the things that he later did, which is sent 16 pipe bombs to 13 victims around the country, and he's triggered off a nationwide manhunt. And that investigation, as quickly as it was resolved, was really sort of shut down major media companies for long periods of time while police had to render bombs safe. His lawyers say that those bombs were hoax devices, but prosecutors would have none of that. They said those devices contained explosive powder, which were derived from fireworks. They contained glass shards, and they contained a chlorine product, which prosecutors say was something called pool shock, which is something that's used in swimming pools. But the intent was to create burns in victims that were hit with this shrapnel from these bombs. They say the bombs would not have worked as designed, but his failure as a bomb maker doesn't make it less illegal to send bombs through the mail, and they want to put him in prison for life. His lawyers, though, say he should get 10 years.
So what's going to happen moving forward? As you said, his lawyers put in that request. With this information, what goes on now?
Well, so now it's up to the court. It's up to the court to weigh what sentence he should get. So he could face life in prison for his crimes.
All right, Jack Date right there in Washington. Thank you so much. And guys, we move on to a stunning story. A Dallas resident and a U.S. citizen has been in CBP and ICE custody for more than 3 weeks, and his family fears he may be deported. So for more, I want to bring in Romina Puga in our L.A. bureau. Romina, can you just give us an idea of what happened to him?
Yeah, Kim. So 18-year-old Francisco Erwin Galicia, who was born in the U.S., has been detained by CBP and ICE for 3 weeks now. He was on his way to North Texas for a soccer scouting event with his 17-year-old brother Marlon Galicia and a group of friends when they came across a CBP checkpoint. Now, Marlon, who was born in Mexico, had his school ID, and Francisco, who was born in Texas, was carrying his Texas ID, and they were both detained. Marlon recently signed a voluntary deportation form after just 2 days because he wanted to speak with his mom. So he's currently living with his grandma in Reynosa, Mexico. But Francisco has been in custody of U.S. Customs and Border Protection and ICE for more than 3 weeks. His family says he is being wrongfully detained because he is a U.S. citizen. His attorney, Claudia Galan, said she met with CBP officers last week and even presented them with his birth certificate and other documents to prove his citizenship, but was unsuccessful in getting him released. It's a complicated and confusing issue, Kim, and they don't know when they're going to get their son back.
So what has the government's response been?
We reached out for comment and we haven't heard back yet.
Wow.
But now he is under ICE's protection, so his attorney is going to reach out to them with his birth certificate and all that documentation from the hospital. There's notes from the staff of the hospital where he was born to the mom, like just a certificate thanking her for using the hospital. So there's all of this evidence, and his attorney is giving that now to ICE, hoping that they'll get him back home soon.
Wow, unbelievable. Romina, thank you so much for the story. We appreciate it. And we're checking in on the 2020 race where presidential candidate Senator Kamala Harris launched a comprehensive marijuana reform bill. It includes legalizing marijuana at the federal level. So I want to go to Zareen Shah in Los Angeles with more. Zareen, as you know, there's many disparities in this country when it comes to marijuana. What does this bill address specifically?
Hi, Kimberly. Kamala Harris launched this bill this morning. She says times have changed. She's teaming up with House Judiciary Chair Jerrold Nadler to decriminalize marijuana at the federal level. Now, this would apply to prior and pending charges. It would remove it from the Controlled Substances Act. So it would basically leave it up to the states to decide their own marijuana policies. That's similar to how they currently do it for alcohol. The bill would also set aside criminal convictions. It would require resentencing for those with marijuana convictions. And it would also prohibit discrimination in many cases. So, for example, landlords could no longer deny people for marijuana use or possession.
So you mentioned that she changed her stance. I think she changed it back in 2015. Do you think that matters?
It's hard to know whether people will even notice, but this is a complete 180 for her. I mean, just 5 years ago, she laughed at the idea of legalizing marijuana. That's currently a position she holds right now. And when she was California AG, tens of thousands of people were put behind bars for marijuana convictions, for marijuana infractions. Of course, now she's coming out. She says times have changed, and this bill certainly reflects that.
And then, Zareen, before you go, do you think that, this has a good chance of passing?
You know, her team says that this is the very first time that a senator has teamed up with the House Judiciary Chair. As you know, she teamed up with Jerry Nadler on this. So they say they feel there is a good chance this is going to be up for a vote. So we'll see. Kimberly?
All right. Zareen Shah right there in Los Angeles. Thank you so much. And guys, we want to take a look at the weather. A lot of dangerous flooding in the Northeast, and hundreds of thousands were without power in New Jersey after ferocious storms last night. You can see that there. So our Lindsay Davis is in Howell, New Jersey with more. Lindsay?
Hey, Kimberly, it is a wet one out here today. A lot of concern, in particular for residents here in Howell Township, New Jersey. And you can see why there are scenes like this playing out throughout the area. Take a look. This tree has just smashed right through the roof of this house, through the side of the house, through the window. We're told by police that this is actually a child's bedroom and that a child was in the room at the time and that the tree narrowly avoided hitting the child. But there is concern also about trees that are on down power lines. It's estimated that about 400,000 people in New York, New Jersey, and Pennsylvania are without power. Police are also urging people to stay off the roads if at all possible. There are a number of trees that have fallen and blocking, in some cases, major roadways. They're urging residents to help each other out, suggesting that particularly in this area, power could be out for an extended amount of time, possibly multiple days, Kimberly.
All right, Lindsay, pretty scary there. Thank you for that. We hope everyone stays safe. And guys, before we go, we want to give a big shout out to some young mental health activists in Oregon. The state's suicide rate is exceptionally high, higher than the national average. So these 4 students here took it upon themselves to do something about it and proposed a state law. So as of the next school year, schools in Oregon will excuse students for mental health reasons. This in addition to their regular sick days. So if a student is feeling down or depressed, they can stay home. This was signed into action last month by the governor, and it's the first law of its kind. This country in general has an epidemic of anxiety and depression, so this law is brilliant. And, they say that children are the future, and this is obviously an example of that. All right, my friends, continue to take care of yourselves. And if you want to stick around, check out the briefing room at 3:30 p.m. Then we'll have World News Prime at 8 p.m. And if you want to stay updated on